Clover Ebi and Winter Schnee, two high-ranking officials in the Atlas military, answering directly to James Ironwood. Throughout the course of Volume 7, Ironwood has kind of gone off the rails, so if Clover was still alive, which of these two characters would have been Ironwood's second-in-command, the next one to take over the spot leading the Atlas military if something untoward was to happen to Ironwood, as might happen in Volume 8? So let's find out which of these two is actually the strongest by pitting them against one another in the next exhibition match of the Phoenix Festival Tournament. These two will be fighting 1v1 using Amity Coliseum as the stage and going to a full or a break with no possibilities of a ring out. I'll do my best to analyze their weapons, their semblances, their fighting styles, etc. and determine who I think would win in this fight. But ultimately it will be determined by all of you in the comments below who ends up winning by majority vote. So make sure to comment who you think would win and give a brief explanation as to why, whether it's semblance advantage, fighting style advantage, or weapons, etc. Now, before we get into analyzing today's combatants, let's go over the previous fight in the Phoenix Festival Tournament between Penny Polendina and James Ironwood. In that video, I said that Penny would end up being the winner, though by a slight margin. Penny, with her ability of omnidirectional unassisted flight, as well as the numerous blades that she has at her disposal, which can also fire lasers. On top of that, she's just an immense powerhouse. But Ironwood is no slouch either, with his two pistols, one able to deal pretty heavy damage, as well as the other allowing him to launch himself through the air in any direction that he chooses using gravity dust rounds. He could keep up with Penny to a certain extent, even if she took flight. Able to launch himself into the air, surprise Penny, and, you know, be able to keep up. Now, with Penny being able to dodge out of the way a lot easier, having omnidirectional flight, whereas Ironwood's only launches him in a single direction, there would be, you know, a bit of a disadvantage there. But even when Penny went to a counterattack with her blades, Ironwood would be able to block with his pistols, etc. Like, it would be a difficult fight for Penny to win, though Penny would still end up winning. Now, in the comments below that video, a lot of people did agree that Penny would be the victor, though a lot of people said that it would be a clean sweep for Penny, that Ironwood just doesn't stand a chance. And I honestly don't believe that's the case, because Ironwood is a powerhouse in and of himself. With his versatility using both of his pistols, he's definitely very strong. The fight that he had in Volume 7 against Watts maybe wasn't the best one to showcase his capabilities, as Watts had complete control of the environment. Even though Watts, you know, isn't much of a physical fighter in and of himself, he still had quite the advantage in that fight. But I plan on doing a specific analysis of Ironwood versus Watts, so, you know, just know that Ironwood is a pretty substantial fighter in his own right, but yes, Penny overall does win against Ironwood. Now, getting into today's combatants, we'll start off by analyzing Clover Ebi, the leader of the Ace Ops, and one who has a semblance that some of us might be familiar with. Not misfortune, but good fortune. I already did a separate video breaking down luck semblances and going more in depth into how they affect the probability of actions rather than the actions themselves, etc. So if you want a more in-depth description or analysis of luck semblances, feel free to go watch that video, but I'll do a brief breakdown of it here. Now, Clover's good fortune seems to mostly affect his own actions rather than affecting the actions of others, though that could just be in the way that the semblance is shown on screen or the way that he chooses to utilize it. Unlike Crow's semblance, where his misfortune seems to affect everyone else around him, that's likely by Crow's choice, because the misfortune affecting himself wouldn't really make much sense. It would make more sense to have that affect everyone else around you. Whereas Clover's, it makes more sense to have it affect himself and his own team, but it's more showcased in the show as it affects himself. Now, good fortune affects the probability of things happening, not the actions that are actually taken. So if we look at when Clover's semblance was first showcased on screen, the fight against the Petragigas that the Ace Ops had in the dust mines of Atlas in episode 3 of Volume 7. Clover sent out the hook of his weapon, Kingfisher, to hook the mask of the Petragigas. He activated his semblance, sent out the hook, and pulled on the line to have it wrap around the mask so he could pull the Petragigas out of its body. Now, the actions that were taken were to swing the hook out and then to pull on the line. The probability of what happened is what was affected by his own skill as well as his semblance. Because no matter how skilled you are, there's always a chance that it could end up missing. That when you swing it out, maybe it went a little bit far, maybe it was a little bit of a direction off, or when it swings out, that it, you know, might wrap around the mask, but then miss hooking onto the line, or just, you know, not be able to hook on the line in general. But thanks to Clover's skill, he was able to get the direction approximately right, as well as his luck on top of that, and when he pulled on it, having it wrap around, that's a pretty lucky shot for someone to make, but with Clover, he was able to expect that the probability of him making that shot was quite high. I still don't think it was necessarily 100%, because creating the probability of that happening 100% is pretty broken and honestly, literally, reality breaking, because probability is something related to reality. I go into that in detail in the Luck Semblances video, but Clover being pretty assured that this attack or this, tactic would work, this is pretty immense for someone to be capable of with their semblance. Now, the weapon that Clover uses, his Kingfisher being a fishing rod, isn't really a weapon you'd think able to do much damage, and really, that's not what its uses are. Clover, even though he's the leader of the Ace Ops, seems to play more of a support role, using his good fortune to affect the rest of his team, so that they have luck when they're in battle, so that hopefully they won't, take mortal wounds, and when they can finish a fight, they can finish it efficiently, get the job done, etc. And his Kingfisher seems to be more support. Considering that it's more of a weapon that could be seen as more like mid-range to long-range, depending on how you launch the hook out, rather than being, dueling someone who has a sword with a fishing rod like he did against Crow at the end of Volume 7. Now, admittedly, Clover was able to keep up with Crow using his fishing rod, but still it doesn't really seem like Clover could have won that fight. Using his good fortune, he could have maybe landed a couple lucky hits against Crow, but Crow could cancel that out using his misfortune, so it would just be a strict, a matter of skill, and even if they are two skilled opponents, Crow just has the weapon advantage, having just a giant sword / scythe, which definitely deals a lot of damage, whereas a fishing rod, not so much. So Clover, his struggle is where he would deal a most amount of damage when it comes to an actual 1v1 fight. Now, this is obviously mitigated when he fights with the rest of his team, as he is used to fighting. So he plays more of the support role and can put opponents in more vulnerable positions using his fishing rod to tie them down, like he did with Tyrion's tail when he was fighting with Robin and Crow in Volume 7, etc. So that's where his skill more is, in support, not necessarily 1v1, so he's definitely going to struggle in this fight, though good fortune is a semblance that cannot be underestimated. Moving on to Winter Schnee, though, with the all-too-familiar semblance of glyphs, which is also shared by her sister, Weiss Schnee, and her mother, Willow Schnee. I did a full breakdown of the semblance of glyphs in a separate video as well, though I will still go over at least a little bit of them and go over the abilities that glyphs have in this video as well. Now, we haven't seen the same number of skills in Winter's case as we have with Weiss's, because, well, Weiss being the main character showcased on screen for 7 volumes, whereas Winter has only technically been shown on screen for Volume 3 and Volume 7, so yeah, just not as much screen time for Winter, but considering she has the exact same semblance as Weiss, we can assume that she has all of the same capabilities. With her glyphs manipulating momentum. The base glyph itself we have seen her use in the fight that she had against Crow in Volume 3, where she launches herself forward at the end before, Ironwood calls off the fight. So she can definitely launch herself forward with momentum, and she could easily add gravity dust to that to affect momentum and launch people forward, draw people in, and, use gravity in that way. Similarly, she could probably add lightning dust to the glyphs to create the time dilation, as well as using ice or fire dust with the glyphs to launch attacks outwards, similar to how Weiss does, except with Winter, she doesn't have dust in her blades, in her weapons, similar to Weiss does. So she definitely doesn't have the versatility when it comes to utilizing dust, and that's showcased in her fighting style when she fought against Cinder. The one major fight that she had in Volume 7, where we got to see some more of her summons, because every Schnee has the ability to summon, as Winter so clearly stated back in Volume 3. But Winter's summons are definitely different than Weiss's. It seems every Schnee, well, obviously fighting different opponents, is going to have different summons available to them. Winter, her main summon, is an Alpha Beowulf, and seemingly she can summon multiple of them at the same time, as in the Volume 5, I believe it was Volume 5, trailer, when she was training Weiss, there was multiple Beowulfs summoned by Winter that fought against Weiss. So Winter can summon multiple large-scale opponents or large-scale Grimm clones at the same time, whereas seemingly Weiss can't. She's only been shown to summon her one Armagigas or her one Borbatusk, etc., her one Queen Lancer, whereas Winter can summon multiple of these large ones at the same time. Not to mention, another summon that she seems quite adept at using is her baby Nevermore Swarm, which is definitely a very useful attack when it comes to distracting opponents, though it doesn't really seem like it deals much damage. She used this against Cinder and used this against Crow in her fight against him in Volume 3, and this is quite an interesting attack. And then in Volume 7, we finally saw her third summon of a Manticore, the flying summon that she has, allowing her to fly in the air. So definitely giving her added versatility. Though with each of these summons, especially when it comes to the Manticore flying in the air, she relies heavily on the Manticore and, gives the opponent some opportunity to take advantage of that, which of course Cinder did. Now, one thing I want to mention when it comes to summoning, and this is more conjecture on my part, but when it comes to summoning multiple large-scale Grimm, like she does with the numerous Beowulfs, I would argue that it would take a lot more aura to control each of these Grimm or each of these summons and manipulate them, and also would factor into how strong they are. Because even when fighting against Weiss in Volume 7 and they were having their training, it was Weiss's one Armagigas versus Winter's one Alpha Beowulf, probably because this would give Winter more control, more power in the Beowulf, especially to stand up against Weiss's Armagigas, which she had a lot more training with. So that's my general take on that, but Winter has a lot of versatility with the semblance of glyphs, as it's probably one of the more powerful, if not the most powerful, semblance in RWBY. Now, Winter's fighting style revolves around using a blade, which seems similar to a katana, kind of a Shamshire, I think, type of thing. I'm not really all that familiar with blades, even though I own a dozen of them. They're more, anime blades, etc. Different topic entirely, but still. Winter's blade can also come apart into two separate blades. The one that comes out of the center seems to be more of a rapier-style blade, but still something that Winter can use to deal damage. Dual wielding, giving that second point of contact, that second ability to do damage. If an opponent blocks one weapon, then she can come in with the second one that they may not be able to block as easily, is definitely something that's very advantageous. When she was fighting against Cinder, it was definitely helpful, considering that Cinder is also one who likes to dual wield, but then also has her maiden powers on top of that, so, the fight was a bit maybe outmatched and in Cinder's favor in that case, but still, Winter's fighting style is very unique and very interesting. She was able to keep pace with Crow, seemingly, during that fight in Volume 3, though it was quite obvious that Crow was just toying with her for the entirety of that fight and not really fighting seriously, whereas Winter was getting increasingly pissed off, so Crow definitely outclasses her, but Winter is no pushover. So, getting into how this fight would actually go, first of all, comparing their experiences, Clover is definitely older than Winter and thus has had more experience in the military fighting against other opponents and utilizing his semblance weapon, etc. So he has probably, I'd say, over a decade of experience on Winter, similar to how Crow had over Winter in Volume 3, and Winter, even though she has a lot of versatility, just doesn't have as much experience. So going into this fight, Winter might be a little bit overconfident, but if Clover being overconfident or confident at the beginning of this, it is warranted. He knows that he is more skilled than Winter. For Winter, her attitude in general seems to be a bit overconfidence, whether that's just putting on airs or something she actually feels. It could also be kind of thrown off balance, as shown in Volume 7 when she confronted her father. It was kind of, pushed overboard, to the point where she had to step out for a moment, etc. Clover is a lot more calm, and I don't really think emotions would really play a factor in Winter's case, but if she put on these airs of overconfidence, Clover could take advantage of that. For what tactics Winter would use to start off this fight, it honestly depends on how close these two would be when they start the fight. Because in Amity Coliseum, what we saw in Volume 3 was that Mercury and Yang kind of touched their hands together before they started fighting, meaning that they were in close proximity to each other when the fight started. If the fight started further apart, things could have gone differently, like they would have started with ranged attacks first rather than going straight for punching or kicking each other. In the case of Clover and Winter, whatever distance Clover is, he could hop backwards and use his fishing rod to still hook Winter's legs, or use his fishing rod from long distance to try to do that, but in Winter's case, if she was close combat, she would obviously go using her blade and attacking right out of the gate, or start off with her baby Nevermore swarm. Because if there's enough distance between them, even if Clover did go to launch out his fishing rod, it seems like the baby Nevermore swarm is actually a quick summon to get off the ground. Unlike Weiss's Armagigas, where she has to focus for quite a while to be able to summon it, Winter seems to just put her blade into the ground and the swarm is able to start summoning immediately, and it's ready to go a lot faster than the Armagigas. So that would be the optimal way to start this battle, as going in for close combat, both of these characters being familiar with each other's fighting styles, both being high-ranking members of the Atlas military, etc., they would know generally what each other's capable of, have seen fights that they've been in, have seen their combat training. For Clover, had probably been one of the ones who vetted Winter for the position in the first place, so Clover might be more familiar with Winter's fighting style than Winter is with Clover's, but still, Winter starting off with this Nevermore swarm would be an advantageous thing to do. As this swarm would go around Clover, he would have to at least be distracted with it for a little while with his fishing rod. He'd be able to keep up with it, you know, using the line and the hook as well as the rod itself to take out these baby Nevermores, and this would give Winter time to do one of two things, in my mind at least. Either go for another summon her Alpha Beowulf, and just get the numbers advantage right out of the gate, which I think would be the better way to go, especially considering it's shown that she can handle multiple summons at the same time, summoning multiple Beowulfs. I think it would be easy enough to summon the baby Nevermore swarm, have them directed to just distract Clover, and this would give Winter enough time to summon her Alpha Beowulf. Honestly, if Weiss gets a summon similar to the baby Nevermore swarm, she's going to become so much stronger and so much more versatile in battle, because she just has 3 summons that are, you know, single target and would take a lot more focus, whereas Winter definitely has an advantage with this baby Nevermore swarm. A lot more of a distraction rather than a finishing blow, and something that would give her a lot more versatility. Now, the other thing she could do with this baby Nevermore swarm is charge directly inwards and try to land a heavy blow against Clover, either bringing out her second blade immediately, trying to go for as many hits as possible just to wear Clover's aura down, as she did against Crow. She sent out the baby Nevermore swarm. Crow was able to counteract this with an aura arc, but Clover, if he's not able to do that, then this would give Winter the opportunity to counterattack. I still think that summoning the Alpha Beowulf would be the better option, and she would go in for the attack. Now, Clover, with this, he would be able to launch his fishing rod possibly out of the baby Nevermore swarm, using it as almost a smokescreen for what he's doing versus Winter, and could possibly use his fishing rod with a lucky shot to just hook Winter's blade as she's going to summon the Alpha Beowulf and just simply sweep it out from under her, just tripping her up, you know, frustrating her a little bit, and this would give Clover even more of an advantage, because with her focus broken, she wouldn't be able to summon the Alpha Beowulf, and then, well, probably the baby Nevermore swarm would dissipate at that point too, without Winter's focus, and it would be a very interesting fight. Ultimately, I think this would come down to close combat, and this is where Clover's semblance wouldn't be as much of a factor, because as Winter is throwing these attacks, as she is wielding both of her blades, this would be a little bit for Clover to keep up with. Sure, he could try to use his fishing rod and keep his distance to try to either restrain Winter's arms or, you know, rope her legs, trip her up, and things like that. And if he's able to do that, he definitely gets the advantage in this fight, especially if he is able to restrain her. But I think Winter, with her summoning and everything that she has, her versatility, wouldn't allow him to do this. We also know from Volume 5, when Weiss was imprisoned at the Bronwyn camp, that she could summon her Armagigas without her weapon. So presumably, even if Clover was able to restrain Winter, she could still focus and summon something that would distract him. So still, Clover is just at more of a disadvantage in this fight than Winter, regardless of his massive experience over her. On top of this, Clover, as I said, is used to fighting as a team, not so much 1v1, where it seems Winter is a lot more adept at fighting 1v1. This would be a very close fight, but I do see Winter coming out the victor. She would be taking damage throughout this fight from Clover's fishing rod being able to trip her up, as also dealing little bits of damage here and there, and Winter would ultimately have to go in close combat. She would be, you know, getting hit by the fishing rod, but she would be able to deal more hits than she was taking, and this would ultimately end in Winter's favor, I think, at least. And with biomes in play, this would only, I think, factor more into Winter's favor. as if there were any biomes where she could dodge for cover, that would give her more opportunity to summon, more places to hide. If she went into the forest or the urban biome, etc., she could hop into a building behind trees, behind glaciers, etc., and just use that to summon. Use that as cover to summon. Or if she went into any of the other biomes, the ice biome or the volcanic biome, etc., there's dust scattered everywhere. That would give her more versatility with her glyphs, utilizing dust similar to how Weiss utilizes it, and in biomes in play, Winter just gets even more of an advantage, whereas Clover, sure, there's a couple more places to hide, but not really anything that would factor into his good luck, at least in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree with my analysis of these two characters and how their fight would end up going? How their semblances match up against each other? And if you watched the other two videos, is there anything you'd like to add to how luck semblances work, how glyphs work, other abilities that they have, etc. For the next exhibition match of the Phoenix Festival tournament, though, we're going to have another interesting one, at least in my mind, and I see how some people, I can already see how some people may not think this is really a fair matchup, but in my mind, it is. We are going to have Jean Arc versus Sienna Khan. Before you say that Sienna just completely outclasses Jean in the amount of skill that she has and experience, think of how their semblances work and how they will interact with one another, because that interaction, I think, is going to make for a very interesting fight. But again, let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this fight, how you think it will go, and, what you're thinking of the next fight. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, tweet me at Phoenix Knight 7, join our Discord server, and I'll see you guys in the next video.